Ketchup is in 97% of American homes. Americans spend over $800 million on ketchup every year. It sits on every table, next to every plate of fries, on every burger. Nobody ever questions it. But I did. I pulled every major ketchup brand off the shelf and read the ingredient lists. What I found is that the most trusted ketchup in America, the one your grandmother used, the one sitting in your fridge right now, was quietly gutted from the inside over the past 50 years. And it is now banned at the largest health-focused grocery chain in the country. This is the investigation. Heinz ketchup wasn't always a chemistry set in a bottle. When Henry Heinz started selling his tomato ketchup in 1876, the label listed 4 ingredients you could find in any kitchen: ripe tomatoes, vinegar, brown sugar, and a handful of spices. For nearly a century, that basic formula barely changed. But by the late 1970s, cost-cutting and industrial agriculture began to reshape what Americans thought was the same old ketchup. The first big change hit in 1973 when Heinz swapped cane sugar for high-fructose corn syrup. It was cheaper because of government corn subsidies and a spike in global sugar prices, and it crept onto the label quietly, first listed as corn syrup in 1978, then as high-fructose corn syrup soon after. By the early 1980s, the sweetener in America's #1 ketchup was no longer sugar at all, but a blend of industrial corn syrups made from genetically modified corn, 92% of the U.S. crop by 2025. The tomato itself did not escape the accountant's knife. In 1991, Heinz officially abandoned whole peeled tomatoes, switching entirely to tomato concentrate, an ingredient cooked down, evaporated, and reconstituted for maximum shelf life and minimum cost. The label read, "Tomato concentrate from red ripe tomatoes," but the days of fresh whole tomatoes were over. At the same time, the ingredient count on the bottle doubled. By 1989, natural flavoring appeared, a vague category that can legally hide dozens of chemical compounds, from onion and garlic extracts to yeast-derived enhancers and even MSG. What began as 4 honest ingredients had become 8, layered with corn syrups, concentrates, and mysterious flavors. The formula that once made Heinz a household name had been quietly rewritten, ingredient by ingredient, for the sake of profit, not purity. In October 2025, Whole Foods drew a line in the sand. Their press release did not mince words. Any product containing high-fructose corn syrup would be banned from their shelves, and Heinz's classic ketchup, the bottle most of us grew up with, was at the top of the list. For decades, Heinz had been a fixture in 97% of American homes, a brand so trusted it felt like family. But now, a major retailer was calling it out, not for taste or tradition, but for what had crept into the recipe: industrial corn syrup derived from 92% GMO corn, layered into a formula that once needed only 4 honest ingredients. Here's the part that should make you angry. Heinz did not just lose shelf space, they lost the moral high ground. Instead of cleaning up their flagship ketchup, they rolled out a pricier version called Simply Heinz. It is a throwback, almost a confession in a bottle. Cane sugar replaces the corn syrup, the ingredient list shrinks, and the label leans hard on nostalgia. But check the price tag. Simply Heinz costs up to 40% more than the regular bottle, even though it is just a return to what Heinz sold for a century. The original recipe, now repackaged as a luxury item, sits right next to the cheaper corn-sweetened version, the same one that Whole Foods just rejected as unfit for health-conscious shoppers. This was not just a loss for Heinz. It was a public verdict on the entire direction of processed food. When a retailer as big as Whole Foods bans the most iconic ketchup in America, it is not a niche protest, it is a warning shot. Ingredient drift is not just a hidden detail anymore, it has real-world consequences. And as I pulled bottle after bottle off the shelf, I realized if Heinz could fall this far, what about every other brand in the aisle? Hoping for better from the rest of the ketchup aisle, I started pulling bottles, Hunt's, Del Monte, every store brand within reach. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Hunt's once ran ads blasting Heinz for using high-fructose corn syrup, promising their ketchup was the real thing. But by the early 1980s, Hunt's quietly slipped corn syrup into their own recipe, chasing the same cost savings. Today, Hunt's Natural claims to skip high-fructose corn syrup, but the label still lists natural flavor, a loophole that hides any number of processed additives. The ingredient count hovers at 6 or 7, just like Heinz, and the sugar content lands at 4 grams per tablespoon. Del Monte goes even further. Their ketchup stacks 3 different sweeteners, high-fructose corn syrup, and sugar, layered right after tomato concentrate. The sodium per serving matches a small bag of potato chips. Natural flavors appear here too, vague as ever. Meanwhile, Whataburger's ketchup, beloved in Texas diners, packs more sodium than any national brand and doubles up on sweeteners, a recipe for high blood pressure and sugar spikes. Store brands are not any safer. Walmart's Great Value and Target's Market Pantry both copy the Heinz formula: tomato concentrate, distilled vinegar, high fructose corn syrup, salt, and an 8-item ingredient list. With 92% of corn grown in the United States now genetically modified, nearly every mainstream ketchup is built on a foundation of cheap, genetically modified corn syrup. Americans spend $800 million a year on ketchup, but the real price is paid in hidden sugars, sodium, and mystery additives, no matter which label you grab. Heinz spent millions warning the public about restaurant ketchup fraud through billboards, ads, and even a hotline to report suspicious refills. Their campaign blasted restaurants for refilling Heinz bottles with cheaper, lower-quality ketchup. But the irony is hard to miss. According to a 2023 investigation, 1 in 5 restaurants, 20%, were caught swapping out the real thing for generic ketchup loaded with high-fructose corn syrup and extra preservatives. The motive was saving money, the same motive that drove Heinz to cut corners in their own factories, trading cane sugar for cheap corn syrup and fresh tomatoes for concentrate. Behind the scenes, the story gets uglier. After the 2015 Kraft-Heinz merger, the new leadership doubled down on cost-cutting, not quality. In 2025, the company admitted a $15.4 billion write-down, one of the largest in food industry history, directly tied to ingredient downgrades and lost brand trust. Shareholders sued, arguing that years of cutting corners had gutted the value of the ketchup Americans grew up with. Kraft-Heinz paid out $450 million to settle those claims, all while insisting their changes were just smart business. Then, in January 2026, the fallout hit home. The FDA announced a recall of over 2 million pounds of Heinz ketchup after rodent droppings and urine were found at a Minneapolis distribution hub. Internal audits had already flagged that cost-cutting had slashed sanitation budgets and delayed equipment upgrades. The recall wasn't just a fluke, it was the final act in a long pattern of putting profits over safety. When a company that built its reputation on purity and trust ends up here, it is not just a business story. It is a warning to anyone who still believes the label means what it used to. If you want to avoid the worst ketchup traps, you only need 3 rules. First, check the ingredient list. Real ketchup is simple: tomatoes, vinegar, sugar, salt, and spices. If the label lists more than 7 ingredients, put it back. That extra length almost always means hidden additives, stabilizers, or multiple sweeteners. Second, find the sweetener. If you see high fructose corn syrup, or fructose anywhere in the first 4 ingredients, skip it. High fructose corn syrup is a cheap, industrial sweetener made from genetically modified corn. 92% of all U.S. corn is GMO now, and it has been linked to insulin resistance, fatty liver disease, and higher rates of obesity and type 2 diabetes. Third, watch for natural flavors. That phrase is a legal loophole for dozens of undisclosed chemicals, enhancers, and extracts. If you want real ketchup, something close to what Henry Heinz sold in 1876, stick to ingredient lists you can read in one breath with sugar or no added sweetener at all, and no hidden flavors. These 3 habits will filter out most of the junk before it ever hits your cart. Real ketchup, the kind that does not hide behind a wall of chemicals, still exists. You just have to know where to look and what to look for. Annie's Organic Ketchup keeps it simple. Tomato paste, organic cane sugar, vinegar, sea salt, onion, allspice, and clove. 6 ingredients, all of them familiar, none of them vague. Primal Kitchen's unsweetened ketchup goes even further. Its label lists only 5: organic tomato puree, organic apple cider vinegar, sea salt, and organic spices. No sweeteners at all, just the natural sugars from tomatoes themselves. Simply Heinz is the closest you'll get to the original Heinz recipe on a mainstream shelf. Tomato concentrate, cane sugar, vinegar, salt, onion powder, and spice. No corn syrup, no natural flavoring, and no mystery additives. These brands are not just playing to nostalgia. They are responding to real health risks. High fructose corn syrup, the sweetener that replaced cane sugar in most ketchups, is not just a cheap filler. Dozens of studies link it to insulin resistance, obesity, fatty liver, and heart disease. For anyone over 50, cutting this ingredient is a concrete step toward protecting your health. The safest bottles are the ones with the shortest ingredient lists, no corn syrup and no natural flavors, just tomatoes, vinegar, a little sugar or none at all, salt, and spices you can pronounce. That's how you spot the real thing. The ketchup aisle still hides high fructose corn syrup, GMO corn, and vague natural flavors behind trusted brands. Every squeeze carries risks: insulin resistance, obesity, and heart disease. Meanwhile, the original recipe now costs extra. If a label cannot earn your trust, neither can the company behind it. Thanks for watching.